Hello everyone and welcome back. In today's video I'm going to be talking about another one of my favorite TV shows, SeaQuest DSV. In particular, we're going to examine the question, could Star Trek and SeaQuest be in the same universe? What is SeaQuest, you might ask? Well, it is a science fiction show that debuted in 1993, the same year as Deep Space Nine, and aired for 3 seasons. It has often been compared to Star Trek Under the Water. Particularly, the first season had many similarities with The Next Generation. Also, the crew, in my opinion, both their principles and their camaraderie, would fit right in on a Starfleet vessel in Star Trek. And yes, that is a dolphin as a member of the crew. His name is Darwin, and he's the best ever. But we'll be getting back to him in just a few minutes. First, however, we're going to look at a possible historical development that can show a connection between the time period of SeaQuest and Star Trek. The SeaQuest operated under the authority of the United Earth Oceans Organization, often referred to as simply the UAO. And you can see their logo here. It may look somewhat familiar if you know the logo of the United Earth, which we saw in the 2150s on the show Enterprise, not to mention the symbol of the Federation, which we saw from 2161 and onward in the later Star shows, at least in terms of chronology. Now, in my headcanon, I could see it's plausible how the UAO could have been an inspiration for the creation of the United Earth sometime after World War III, or possibly even a direct connection to the original organization. Because not only are their logos similar, they also operate under many of the same principles, and the same can be said about the Federation later on. Now, I know in the real world, all of these logos are clearly inspired by that of the United Nations, but I think they provide a not too far-fetched level of development of this so-called shared universe, if you believe in that theory. Now, on for more general terms, let's look at a more specific example. This is going to be the concept of genetic engineering, which is present in both shows. In Star Trek, we are familiar, of course, with Khan and his genetically engineered augments, who took over much of the world during the eugenics wars, which according to TOS took place between 1992 and 96, when they were overthrown. Now, in SeaQuest, the backstory also includes a series of wars that took place in either the late 90s or early 2000s, and also in that case, genetically engineered life forms, called Gelfs, were developed as soldiers. Now, obviously, those years are slightly different, and the situations are not exactly the same. However, they are very similar, and Spock did mention in the TOS episode Space Seed that Earth's historical records from that time period are very sketchy. So this could explain any small discrepancies between these two very similar events in Earth's history. As for another similarity, we're going to be looking at the cetacean connection. In other words, the idea of dolphins or other aquatic mammals serving on ships. We know, of course, that Darwin was a key member of the crew on SeaQuest. And if we look at this blueprint from the Enterprise D, we can see the presence of the Cetacean Ops Department. Now, this is not a fan image. This is from the official Enterprise D blueprints, which were created by Rick Sternbach, who worked on the show. The idea goes that dolphins and other aquatic mammals were used to handle difficult navigational issues. And it's true that the Cetacean Ops Department never appeared on screen. However, there are a few references to it. In the TNG episode Yesterday's Enterprise, Cetacean Ops is mentioned in some background comm chatter. although this technically would not be the same universe since it was an alternate timeline. However, in the TNG episode Perfect Mate, Geordi mentions to one of the Enterprise's visitors that there are dolphins on board. And furthermore, in the Lower Decks episode Second Contact, the Cetacean Ops Department is mentioned directly in dialogue. Therefore, it would seem that there are indeed dolphins serving on starships into the 24th century, which is another possible connection between SeaQuest and Star Trek. These are interesting connections, you may say, but they could also be coincidences. They're not necessarily direct references. So, are there any direct on-screen connections between the two shows? It turns out the answer to this is yes. First, let's go to the TNG episode Eye of the Beholder, where the following personnel file can be seen on screen. And for the individual in question, before being assigned to the Enterprise, we can see that he served on the USS SeaQuest, obviously named in honor of the important submarine that served the UEO in the 21st century. Now, is there any other connections like this in SeaQuest? The answer is again yes. In the SeaQuest episode Dreamweaver, we can see a plaque commemorating the Nomad space probe, which is described as the first interstellar probe to seek out evidence of new life forms. This is clearly a reference to the Nomad probe encountered by the crew of the Enterprise in the TOS episode The Changeling. We can see even that they have similar designations and that they were both launched in 2002. And of course, who could forget when Captain Kirk's great-great-grandfather appeared on the show? Overall, I have to give this theory the Darwin seal of approval. I think it checks out. But what do you all think? Is it crazy, or do you think it could actually work? I thank you for joining me for another video, and I hope you have a blessed day.